All righty, we ready to go. Hard to believe. Start this morning. And God willing, if he doesn't return between now and then, we'll finish in the next while, right? Can we take a minute and just kind of work or rework what we've done? And I'll try and save enough time that I don't chew the whole thing up for the new lesson. But where'd we start? We start talking about, is there a difference between discipleship and Bible study and fellowship? Yes, there is. We started with just a good idea or a command, distinctions, differences to remember. I hope some things just to help you think through. If you're taking this class, I'm going to assume you have an interest in discipleship training, or you wouldn't be taking the class. But too much of what is passed off as discipleship training is little more than fellowship or a Bible study. And again, nothing wrong with either one. Nothing wrong with both. It's just not discipleship training. What's a key? The transferability. That's why on the little booklets that you got your lessons from, I call it transferable cross-training, because the whole notion is if it's not transferable, it's not discipleship training. It may be great stuff. It's just not discipleship training. Discipleship training is always, always, always transferable. What are some examples? We talked about first lesson, disciple making. Remember triads, right? Just remember triads. Keep it simple. Keep it moving. Why? What's the big idea? It's not just Karl's thing. It's not just your thing. The command was given through the 12 to the rest of the world. And no one should try and argue that the gifts and personalities, even of the 12, were the same. They weren't, and certainly the rest of the world, but Jesus gave the commission to all of us. John 17, again, reiterates that the things that they have been taught, they've been taught so they can continue to teach others in the high priestly prayer. It's all meant to hand off, to hand off, to hand off. Probably encapsulated in the 2 Timothy 2:2, when Paul says the things I've taught you, Timothy, trust the faithful men who will teach others also. We talked about assurance, and I've told you if you can remember the acrostic, COP, you can remember. First chapter, last chapter, 1 John, context, options, promise. How do I know for sure I'm a Christian instead of just hope I am? It's the difference between living with the sword of Damocles swinging over my head versus confident. Arrogant? No. Arrogance means I think it depends on me. With assurance or forgiveness, either one of them. It doesn't depend on me. It depends on the one who's always good for his promises. That's Christ. Same thing with the forgiveness. I want to hit one more thing that I use with both the forgiveness lesson and the assurance lesson that I didn't catch, and I'll catch it before we jump on the trials, the last one we use. How do you deal with idiosyncrasies? That's what trials are about. Something that constitutes a testing or a time of testing. We'll talk about that. But in the booklet, in the lessons I gave you, there was a train. And I stole this from Campus Crusade for Christ, and I don't know who they stole it from. I'm sure it was stolen from somebody, but I've used it so many times because it's visual, it's simple, it's easy. I've asked people when we're talking about feelings versus fact. And I will say that ultimately that the faith is factually based. It's factually driven. A leap of faith, no, it's not. Our faith is in a carpenter who was killed, crucified, and the grave is empty. That's fact. The grave is empty. Liberal or conservative, they'll acknowledge the grave is empty. They just don't all know why. But we have a factually driven faith. However, we are emotional people. So I don't have to deny that I'm an emotional person without at the same time saying, ultimately my faith rests on the character of God, God keeping his promises, doing what he said he would do. He said he was going to come, thinking of Advent coming up, at Christmas in a couple of months. He said he would come the first time as a sacrificial lamb. He did, just like he said he would, just like the prophets said he would. They call it messianic prophecy. He promises that he's coming back a second time to rule as the Lion from the tribe of Judah. He will. When people say, I acknowledge he came the first time, just like he said he would, as a sacrificial lamb, but I just don't want to believe he'll come back as a roaring lion, I would say, well, then you help me understand why he fulfilled prophecy literally on the first coming. I'm not betting against the fact that he won't do the same thing on his second coming. But sometimes, sorry, bro, I guess wrong. Sorry. But just sometimes that whole fact feeling, you can tie that very much into your assurance of salvation. I feel like a Christian, I don't feel like a Christian. Or the forgiveness issue, I feel forgiven or I don't feel forgiven. I can know with 100% certainty I'm forgiven, but I can still feel pretty stupid about something I said or did. Just thinking, what was I thinking? Why did I do that? I'm just saying that just to see those two issues sometimes in conflict. And I want to give you a simple illustration that again, I've used many times with a train. I'll say, if you have a train, I think you've got a picture of it in the material I shipped you, but if you have a train engine that burns coal, and if it's followed by a coal car that's stacked up with coal, followed by the cute little caboose, with the little person on the back waving at you, as long as you throw coal into an engine that burns coal, what will that engine do? What will that train do? The engine will move, and that train will move. If a person says this is boring, throwing the coal into the object that burns coal, an engine, a coal-burning engine, I would rather throw the coal on the caboose. What will that train do? That train will sit there. It won't go anywhere, because cabooses don't drive a train. Cabooses follow a train. The power is in the engine, and that's why the coal thrown into the right object to be part of a train that moves. I've asked, if you unhitch the coal car from a train that burns coal, and someone is throwing coal from the coal car into the engine, and it's wanting to move, can you unhitch the engine? Sure you can. What will happen? Well, the train will actually go faster because there's not as much weight. So not only will it continue to move, it will move even faster. If you decide to uncouple the engine, and just throw the coal on top of the caboose, folks, you can bury that caboose in coal. That train won't go anywhere. And the truth of the matter is, if that train does begin to move, it has to be on an incline that says gravity's just pushing or pulling, because a coal car that's throwing all of its coal on the wrong object, there's no powertrain. So it just has to be gravity moving it. So it's either going to stand still, or in time it'll be going downhill. Now, if I take that same train and if I say the engine represents the fact of God and His Word, the engine, put over the top of it, I would if I was right now, fact of God and His Word. Coal car represents my faith in the fact of God and His Word, because the proper object of our faith is God Almighty. And then if I say the caboose represents how I feel about my faith in the fact of God and His Word. As long as I'm putting my faith in the right object of faith, and that is the faith that's supposed to be in God, that spiritual train will run. It'll go uphill, it'll go downhill, it'll keep moving. If I am challenged sometimes between putting my faith in the fact of God and His Word, or throwing my faith, represented by what? The coal car, into how I feel, the caboose, about the fact of God and His Word, you can put your faith in a caboose all day long, and that train ain't going to move. That spiritual train will just go static. It'll just stop. Or if it moves any direction, it's going to go downhill, because the only way it can go is downhill if there's no engine source to it. The gravity starts pushing or pulling it. But it's going to be going downhill. So I'll say, if I uncouple the caboose from the train, it's represented by what? The engine, the fact of God and His Word, and my faith is in the right object, God Almighty. That train will run. That train will run with or without the caboose, just like a coal-burning engine would run with or without the caboose. But in the same way that you cannot drive a train by the caboose, if you try and run your Christian, your spiritual train by how you feel about your faith and the fact of God and His Word, it won't go anywhere, folks. It'll just stagnate. It will end up ultimately going downhill. It's the only way it can go. So when someone says to me, how do you illustrate the priority of the fact of God and His Word over my feelings? I'll say I use that little train. It doesn't deny, the train's cool when it's got the caboose. Everyone likes to see the caboose. Little guy, Nebraska, train ran outside our backyard. My little brother and I used to put little pennies on the track or rocks on the track. And back there in the Midwest where you had the stockyards and stuff, I mean, the trains were hundreds. It wasn't just a couple of cars. They'd be in the hundreds. And when we would stand by the railroad tracks, my little brother and I, it would just shake. The whole ground would shake. I mean, the cars are enormous, and especially the little guys just standing off the side. And then when a couple of hundred cars goes by, you'd run up to look for your penny, and it's flattened or the rocks are squashed, and then you pick them up, and you think that's great fun. But it's scary. I've asked people in my flying around, sometimes I've been going through the Midwest areas, wherever, where you're flying at 30,000 feet or whatever it is, 20,000 feet, and you look down and you see something that looks like a caterpillar. And it's just kind of weaving itself along, and you go, it's that same train. It's just you're viewing that train from 30,000 feet outside a jet instead of standing right in front of the tracks. When you're right in front of it, it's scary, it's intimidating, it shakes. When you're looking at it as a member of the body of Christ at 30,000 feet through Christ's eyes, it looks like a caterpillar that you step on. It's kind of cute. So I use that little train to remind me the fact of God and His Word is supposed to trump how I feel about the fact of God and His Word. And that can help me. When something comes up culturally that, how do you feel about so-and-so? How do you feel about such and such a subject or a topic? I'll go, I can have my feelings. They're part of being human. But my obedience is supposed to be to the fact of God in His Word. The Word of God is what's inspired. Do not allow the caboose of your feelings to trump the fact of God and His Word, or you put yourself at the mercy of anyone that knows how to spin your feelings, and anyone who knows how to manipulate your feelings. Don't do it. It's not working. Now, lesson on trials. This is the fourth one of the ones that I told you when I would take our mission teams out, they had to have. Why? Because I can promise you, I mean, we would start the second week of June with boot training. We would usually end sometime in August with our own camps after the students would come back. So we had full summers, working. We would go in the morning and run daily vacation Bible schools, which were enormous in little towns. Because in little towns, what we found out, no one church would put on daily vacation Bible schools, but we'd go in 10 or 12 churches, and that's not an exaggeration, and start bringing all their kids, because it was their only chance to have something like this. But they were older brothers and sisters. So what we'd do is we'd use the DVBS, Daily Vacation Bible Schools, in the morning, and we'd run for the kids. The churches would want us there. They would put us up and such. We would bring all the materials. We paid for everything. A lot of little churches don't have the money to do it. But then the older kids would see the girls and the guys from the high school and college age people we had, and they would want to meet them. So we'd run evangelistic meetings in the evening. So it was DVBS from 8 o'clock in the morning till about noon. And then in the evening, say from, 4 or 5 or 6 until whenever we break in the evening, it would be evangelistic outreaches. When you're going, we'd spend a week in a town, then we'd go to the next town. Spend a week in a town, go to the next town. Far from not having places to go, we did this for years. I had a backup. I had people asking me, when can you come back, or when would you come? Because the kids did a wonderful job. And again, it wasn't 4 people wearing themselves out while 40 people watched them. It was 44 people involved in ministry. Because if you aren't going to be involved in ministry, you're not going with me. I'm a hard nose on that. I want everybody involved, because those are the people that figure out when you can lead high school and college and junior high and kids to Christ during the summer, you can come back to your schools and become student leaders in your schools, because you've already been doing it all summer. And that is exactly what happened, and I would have no fear of you checking with people watching what we were doing during the 80s doing that, and they would say that's what happened. But one of the things that I watched happen over the years was wonderful kids who would give you their whole summer. I laughed and go, they pay me to spend the summer with me as we take them out doing work. It was a blessing. It was a wonderful thing. But kids can get on each other's nerves. Like the first couple of weeks, something that was fun. By the third week, fourth week, fifth week, whatever it is, you can have some people, those little idiosyncrasies that were cute at first, all of a sudden it's like, why don't you knock that off? You always do that. Why don't you stop doing it? I was like, what? I mean, it's the same thing I do. Well, why do you click your jaw when you eat your food? I don't know. Maybe I've got that TJ, whatever. Just silly stuff. And so I realized real early into it, we better have something on trials, times of testing, so that as God is using this group for something wonderful and eternally relevant, at the same time we don't allow something to happen either naturally or supernaturally, because demons could be involved, but our flesh is plenty able to pick on idiosyncrasies and end up fighting with each other. So I would have it anticipating sooner or later there's going to be issues. So we would be preemptive with this lesson on trials. That's why I included it. I want to give it to you because again, it's very transferable. It's very simple. I would begin it this way, and I would say the first thing I tell people, I want you to remember 4 P's. You can remember 4 P's. You can work through trials. I'll say God has a purpose for trials. He gives us promises through trials. He promises protection in the trials. And then he's got a master plan for the whole thing. There's a method of the madness when it's all said and done. So, again, you'll see your outlines. You got it under 4 P's. Beside each P, I have a verse because I want you to remember it. And contextually, it's in context. Don't try and play games with that. So I'd say, what is God's purpose for trials? Start with a purpose. What's the purpose of trial? Why do I think that's important? Because I've had people say to me, in all sincerity, particularly when they come out of like the health, wealth, and prosperity movement, and if you're in that, doesn't mean you don't love Jesus, but you better start reading your Bible. Because I end up picking up the collateral damage in this office from people that are committed to health, wealth, and prosperity. When they love God, they believe promises made by people about their guaranteed health, wealth, and prosperity. It doesn't happen. And then they first blame themselves because they must have secret sin. And then they secondly start blaming God because why'd he let me get into this mess if it wasn't true? And some of us end up with the collateral damage. So if you're really promoting hard that health, wealth, and prosperity, trials are not divine payback from an angry God. Trials from the hand of God are not a sign of hidden sin that somebody has to figure out because they're not repentant of hidden sin. James 1 says what? James 1 says, to the 12 tribes who have been scattered abroad, verse 1, verse 2, consider all joy when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance or strength. But let this strength or endurance have its perfect result, that you may be perfect, complete, lacking nothing. Verse 5, if anyone lacks wisdom, in other words, why am I going through this? I don't understand. He's free to ask of God, who liberally will, he doesn't upbraid, it means he doesn't beat you up for asking what's going on when it's a trial from his hand. So I look at trials and I go, okay, I hear on TV that trials are a sign of hidden sin on my part and a God that's very unhappy with me. Maybe. Maybe God is disciplining me like he did the 10 nations or the 2 nations of old when he would send someone in to smack them around because of their constant sin. I'm sure that would have been considered a time of testing. God's hand certainly was behind it. God certainly, in Isaiah 45, called up Cyrus to be his battering ram to go discipline Israel. That was of God. The text says so. But there are many times when we go through trials of various types that we're not told it's payback from an angry God. We're told it's a time of testing that is supposed to produce strength, because that's what the word meant, strength or endurance, making us perfect. The word meant complete. It doesn't mean sinlessly perfect. But perfect meant complete, whole. That was the idea behind it. Perfect and complete, lacking nothing. What are we talking about? I'll give you a clear one. I have been happily married to my wife, Gail, 40 years this year. It was our 40th anniversary. When I was a young whippersnapper, I thought sure that I was going to marry a girl named Nancy. And I can remember crying in my bedroom as about a 19-year-old telling God how he had ruined my life. I'm a brand new Christian. Look, I even became a Christian. She's a Christian. I already can see our whole life planned out in front of us, and you went and wrecked it because she moved how far away, and life will never be the same. I mean, there are all kinds of examples of trials. That, for a 19-year-old, was a trial. At least for this 19-year-old, a trial. And while I was on my knees in the middle of my bedroom floor on a throw rug, I still remember shaking my fist at God. I remember when James 1 went through my mind. Consider it all joy when you encounter various trials, knowing the testing of your faith produces strength. And I just thought, I don't see how this is joy. This is depressing. And I don't see how this makes me stronger. I think my life has been ruined. And then I think of a John 14:6. Jesus said he was truth incarnated. I think of a Titus 1:2. God never lies. If God never lies, then somehow he's got something going on through this situation that is not a capricious God beating me up, but it's a God getting me ready for something that's coming around the corner before I probably even know the corner is going to be there. So when I'm going through James 1, these verses, I will ask people to highlight a couple of words. First, the word consider. Some of the translations say consider it joy, some say count it joy. So you can use either one. My point is, it's a choice. When you hit a time of testing that is from the hand of God, well, how do I know when it's testing from God's hand versus when it's dealing with my own sin? Verses 12 and 13 in the same chapter, James deals with that. God doesn't tempt anyone to do something morally, ethically evil. So if someone says God is behind me wanting to steal or not to steal from my body, no. God is not one who's going to solicit you to do anything evil. There are times of testing when they're dealing with things that make me stronger. They're not morally or ethically solicitation to do evil. I believe those come from the hand of God. If someone says, I'm really struggling with my lust over a particular person, yeah, don't hang that one on God. He says that comes, verses about 13 through 15, when we leave the safety and protection. God gives perfect gifts. He says no shadow, no variation. He's always consistent. So don't hang it on God that he is the one soliciting you to do evil. Now, that'll come from your flesh, your imagination, and maybe demonic darts. But when it's something that is truly an opportunity to grow, and it's a time of testing, I would think to myself, okay, consider it all joy. Am I going to do that or not? See, that's just an issue of being obedient or disobedient. Am I going to count it something where God is going to make me stronger, consider it that? Or am I going to say, no, since I can't figure this out, this is wrong? Do I know more about things than God? I said earlier, I alluded to it, God knows about the corners, what's around him before I even know there's a corner there. I can put my trust in myself, or I can put my trust in the one who really knows everything and knows about the corners I'm going to be facing, the ministries he's going to have me ready for. He's having to test me to get me ready for it. He's having to strengthen me to get me ready for it. He's working on my arm. He's working on this arm. He's working on my head, working on my feet. I've asked players, when you are in the weight room, most of the guys don't like. There's a few guys that are gym junkies that love being in the gym. A lot of guys don't like to be in the gym even at a professional level. They do it because they need to for their job. But I've asked them, the physical trainers in there, is it their job to destroy you? And they'll say, no, it's their job to make sure I maximize everything I can of the physical endowment I've been given, so that, well, when the game's on, I'm the one standing instead of the one on the ground. So I say, even though they put you through regimentation of stuff that can be quite painful during your lifting and stuff, the ultimate purpose is what? And they'll say very positive, not negative. I'll say exactly the same way with trials. God allows us to go through trials. It usually means he's getting us ready for something. Ask one of our players. He's a quarterback. Now he works for ESPN. And I'm not usually a name dropper, so I'll resist. But you would know him if you follow football at all. But I asked him, and I said, if Coach Holmgren said to you that you don't need to worry about coming out to practice this week, just get some Gatorade and an umbrella and plan on sitting on the side and watching. I said, what did he just tell you? And he said, Coach just told me I'm not playing. And I said, well, no, he didn't. He just said, he said, if the coach isn't investing in you and getting you ready for next week, then you're not playing. I said, so when the coach tells you this is going to be a tough, long, hard week because we got to get ready for whatever team's coming in, he says he's just told you you're right in the middle of the game plan. That's why he's investing in you and working you so hard, not to beat you up to get you ready. I then spun that for the players that were listening, and I said, when God takes the time to invest in you, do you think it's to beat you up? That would be a capricious God. Trials, when I look at them and I consider the situation, I realize if he's investing in me, he's getting me ready for something that's coming around the corner. So instead of seeing that as a God, what are you doing to me? And I felt embarrassed when I was yelling at God about, her name was Nancy, and I always thought she was the greatest lady that ever lived. I have said so many times since then in my married life with Gail, I'm so glad I didn't marry Nancy. I thought she was the greatest girl in the world. That's truly what I thought. But after I met Gail, I thought, man, am I glad I didn't marry her. The girl I want to marry is Gail. And we've been very happy for 40 years. What am I suggesting? I can either consider or put my trust in what my brain is big enough to wrap my hands around, or if I can't wrap my hands around, I say, well, then this can't be from God. What if it is? What if God, who is infinite, is just bigger than your brain, which is finite? Oh, I'll trust him when I can figure things out, but I won't trust him when I can't. Any non-Christian can do that. You don't have to be a Christian to live that way. Things go the way you want, you're happy. Things don't go the way you want, you're not happy. What non-Christian can't live that way? I'm supposed to be a life that reflects something different. God lives in me. 1 Corinthians 3:16, I'm a temple of God. 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20, I'm a temple of God. Ephesians chapter 1, 13 and 14, I'm a temple of God. God lives in me. Well, if I'm supernatural, and why say if I can naturally figure it out, it's okay. If I naturally can't, I don't accept it. What non-Christian doesn't live that way? And that shows nothing about my supernatural life. It just says I'm living just like anybody else. Why should anybody else be impressed with my Christian life when I live just like them? So at any rate, consider. Obedient, disobedient, that's your call. Consider it all joy. I've asked people, why doesn't he say consider it happiness when you encounter various trials? The word happy was a Greek word that meant because of what's going on circumstantially around me, I'm happy. It's an emotional response. I'm happy. I like what's happened. The word joy was a word etymologically that meant I can have inner contentment in spite of what's going on around me. So God doesn't tell me that I have to smile and pretend like I like something if I don't like it. But he says I can consider, that's my call, consider it, choose to consider something joy. Can you be content in spite of what's going on because you know the one who controls all things? Are his plans bigger than your plans? If they are, then I can still say, I may not like it, but I can remain content in his hand. Why? Because he loves me. He loved me enough to die for me. He's not going to drop me now. So consider it joy when. I contrast that with the word if. It doesn't say consider all joy if you encounter various trials. They're coming. So again, someone that tells you when you're happy, healthy, and walking with God, you don't have to experience trials, that person is either a liar or very, very naive. Trials are promised to us as a way of God making us stronger. Just think of the word times of testing. They make you stronger. If I think the only way I can know God is got his hands wrapped around me is when everything goes exactly like I say God's obligated in my life or I demand of him, your God is too small. Consider all joy when, not if, you encounter various trials. Why do trials come in different shapes and forms? Because God's getting me ready for different ministries. Maybe he has to work on arm, leg, head, eyes, ears, I don't know. There's something he's having to work on in my life to get me ready for what's coming. So consider it all joy when, not if, you encounter various. It's not the same trial over and over. If you always face the same thing over and over, it wouldn't constitute a trial because sooner or later I get it figured out. Trials are things that are I'm being challenged with as a way to make me stronger, not solicitations to evil. We already talked about that. Consider it all joy when you encounter various trials, knowing. It doesn't say hoping God will make it, all make me stronger. It's knowing. Consider it all joy when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith will produce strength, or it will produce endurance. Why can't I go into a trial when I find myself in the midst of it, knowing God's going to bring me out on the other side stronger, instead of humiliating myself, embarrassing myself, disobeying God, and then when he finally gets me through it, then I go, oh man, he really did work this for good. You go, yeah, just like he said he was going to. In other words, for the one that can say, I'm so embarrassed, but I learned on the far end God keeps his promise, why can't we, as we grow in maturity, say, since I already know that's what he's going to do, why do I have to tank down and take everybody down with me when I know he's going to make me stronger in the process anyway? Maturity is not allowing myself to be emotionally manipulated and drag everybody else down with me. It's knowing God is God, he's good for it, from beginning to end. That's where I think the people with gray hair or no hair, sometimes the kids need to listen to them. Because sometimes when you're young, you haven't had the chance to watch God get you through how many different things. As an older person, you go, he's been faithful for 30 years, 40 years, 25 years, 50 years. Why would he not be faithful now? You can learn from those old gray hairs. In North America, when you think people, if you're over 30, you're not relevant anymore, you end up with shallow, immature Christian thinking. Age 30, you don't even know all the questions to ask. How about that? We have so much information. You can have access to information. It doesn't make you wise. It doesn't make you knowledgeable. It does not give you understanding or discernment. Sometimes experience is a heck of a teacher with all of that. If someone was smart enough, by God's grace, to live to be 60 or 70 years old with some gray hair, why don't you find out what God did in their life to help them figure out how to get that old? I will make a statement, a racist statement. You ready for this one? And we're accused of being racist. How about I fulfill it on this? And I'll say, I think that Eastern and Middle Eastern groups are wiser on this one than people in North America and Western Europe. They usually honor the people with gray hair because they know they survived to get through another day. It's more Western America and North America where you live fast, die young, and make a good-looking corpse, man. That's my motto. And again, you got to live long enough to get some wisdom. So honor some of the people that are older than you and see how they survived. Not bad advice. Consider it, that's your call. Joy, not happiness. When, not if. Various trials, not the same thing. Knowing that it's going to produce strength. I can walk in from that verse and go, God's purpose is to make me stronger. What's his promise? I use Romans 8:28. We know that God causes how many things to work together for good to those who love God and called according to his purpose. The word is all. All in Greek means the same thing as all in English. I mean, every circumstance that I find myself in that is a result of God's hand in testing me are going to ultimately work for the good. That's what he says. You go to the bank on it or not? Well, emotionally, I just don't. That's not what I ask. I've been fooled by my emotions. I go to the bank on God keeping his word. It's impossible for God to lie. Remember Titus 1:2. Christ was truth incarnated, John 14:6. You know, I like both those words. I've repeated them. If that is true, and it is, then why in the world, when I find myself in the middle of testing, which God has already told me his purpose is to make me stronger, and he's promised will work for my good, why do I shake my fist at him? That was the second verse when I was thinking about that young lady, Nancy. And I can tell you it was as real to me as Keith and Kent in my office right now staring at me. I go, when I was shaking my fist, first I thought of the James 1, I'm going to make you stronger, and the Romans 8:28, and I work for your good. And I stopped right in the middle of my whining, and I thought, I must look so stupid to God Almighty when he's taking the time to order my life. Remember Ephesians 2:10? We're his workmanship. It's an artist's term. He's one of a kind, unique. We're his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for the good work which he prepared beforehand for us to walk in. If I'm breathing, I still have purpose. Why? Because God, according to his word, has already been creating me and fashioning me to walk in the good work which he prepared beforehand for me to walk in. If I'm not breathing, I'm going to be with him. As long as I'm breathing, he still has a purpose for me, or I wouldn't be breathing. In other words, until God's done with me, no one can take me out of this place. Once God's done with me, no one can keep me here. So I'm breathing, so there must be purpose, at least for today still. So why should I act like, God, why are you hurting me and against me when he loved me enough to die for me, promised me he's always going to make things work for my good as he makes me stronger in the process? Well, I don't feel that. Well, then trust your feelings. Throw the coal on the caboose. You can bury the caboose of your feelings, you end up stationary or going downhill because your feelings can be manipulated. God won't manipulate. God's yes is yes, his no is no. You can go to the bank on it. So I think to myself, okay, purpose what? Make me stronger. Promise what? Will work for my good. I got protection as I'm going through. I put beside that 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. There's nothing come upon you such as is what? It's common to man. It is God who is faithful, who will not allow you to be tested beyond what you are able, but with the testing will provide you a way of escape. I read that and I go, okay, purpose, he's going to make me stronger. Promise, it'll work for my good. Now the protection. Karl, you're not going through anything that somebody else has. Oh, you don't understand. I'm the only. I go, no, you're not. Quit playing the Elijah martyr. I'm the only one left. No, you're not. Get off your face. I got 7,000. I've already got hidden. Come on, quit playing, Elijah. Just let me work in and through your life. There's nothing you are going through. There's nothing I'm going through someone else hasn't already gone through. And it doesn't say it is Karl who is faithful. It says it is God who is faithful, who will not allow you to be tested beyond what you are able. So apparently if I'm in the middle of a testing, God has already signaled he's going to get me through it. Because if I couldn't get through it, then it's beyond what God can do. And then, so apparently that's not working for my good so much, is it? Because remember, if it's a testing time from him, it's to what? Make me stronger. It's to what? Work for my good. I've used these words. Think of these hands. I'll say, trials are not only an opportunity to improve me. It comes from the James 1 verse. Why? Trials make me what? Stronger. And the Romans 8 verse, and they work for my good. But the 1 Corinthians 10 verse says that trials not only improve me, they approve me. How do they approve me? Because if I find myself in the middle of a trial, here's what I said. I've just used my hands. It's real simple. I got cheap visual aids, so it doesn't matter where you live. I'll say, if there is a situation that God says, Karl can't survive this, I believe he keeps his hands just like this. You're not going through. I'm protecting him. I've said, man, if that would have happened to me 6 months ago, it would have killed me. Maybe God says that's exactly why it didn't happen to you 6 months ago, because I knew that. But if I'm in the middle of a situation, then apparently he opened his hands. If he opened his hands so that whatever this time of testing can touch me, then what I already know is, yes, I'm being hit with a test, but I also know, not new, not the first, not the only, and it is God who is faithful, who will not allow you to be tested beyond what you are able. Okay, Lord, if I could have handled it on my own, I guess I didn't even need you. But since this is something that's beyond what I can figure out and handle, thank you, you're making me stronger. And that whole notion about I can handle on my own anyway, arrogant to the bone. There's so many things that can happen. Well, I trust God with the big things, but I take care of the little things myself. I played enough sports that I've got muscles in my body I didn't even know I had, not very big, and when they get tweaked, it can rack your whole body. Sometimes it doesn't take very much. I am thankful that God watches. If he knows the feathers on a bird and the hairs on a head, then he knows everything he needs to know about me, and I'm grateful for that. I will throw everything at him. I had a teacher say to me one time, you take, not just me, it was several of us, you take your prayers to God by the thimbleful or the bucketful. He said, wheelbarrowful. And when the student said by the thimbleful, because I don't want to bother him with, some things, I'm okay on some things, he said, I take it by the wheelbarrowful. He said, your God's too small. He looked at him and the student, well, what do you mean? He goes, you think that your prayers tire God out? Your God is all-powerful. It's no more difficult for him to deal with a wheelbarrow full of prayers than it is a thimbleful. And in fact, what you're saying is arrogant, because you're saying, I need you for the big ones, but I'll take care of the small ones. Newsflash. He pulls out of your life, you're toast. Now, he's not going to pull out of your life as a believer, but being able to thank him for little things, big things, all things, that's part of maturity. So where am I going? I'm going back to, again, I have a privilege not only of in purpose, knowing he's going to make you stronger, he's going to work for your good. What are my verses? James 1, 2 through 4 on the purpose. Romans 8:28 for, going to work for my good. What am I thinking about when I'm thinking about protection? I go, what I'm going through, that's not new. Didn't catch him by surprise. It is God who is faithful, who will not allow you to be tested beyond what you are able. So apparently he approved it. So since he approved it, he's going to get me through it. And with the time of testing will provide you a way of escape. And it means a righteous way of escape. I don't have to say, well, God gave me an unrighteous way to get through this, so I'll do that and blame it on him. God is, remember, same thing. God himself is not, he tempts no one with sin, and he himself is not tempted by sin. So don't lay temptation, solicitation to evil on God. We don't need to do that. He'll take care of it. He'll take care of you. So I think to myself, okay, there's a purpose, makes me strong. A promise will work for your good. I think of my third P, there's protection promised through it, guaranteed by who? God Almighty. It's too strong for me. Then the hands stay shut. Not going to touch you. He's my son. He's my daughter. I won't let him touch it. I'm not ready for it. Oh, I am ready for it. I'm in the middle of it, and he's approved it. If he's approved it, he says, I'll get you through this thing. Well, I couldn't figure out how to get through it. That's probably pretty good. You're finally looking to me instead of yourself. Let's see what I can do with what you couldn't figure out. If you will only trust God for the things you see, your God is no bigger than your brain. No better than your eyesight. My God is bigger than my brain and sees clearer than my eyesight. You say, well, what's his overall plan? I use 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. Blessed be the God and Father of all comfort, who comforts us through all of our affliction, trials. Why? So that we in turn may be able to comfort those in their affliction with the comfort God gave us. When God allows me to go through a time of testing, it isn't so I can say, look how I went through that time of testing. Give me a merit badge. Look how I went through that time of testing. Give me a star. Look how great I am. I've got this thing on with all kinds of stars and stripes and whatever. Wow, isn't he important? No, the whole reason for going through times of testing is so when you see someone else going through what God took you through, they don't have to feel like you did. Because you felt like, I'm alone. Until I finally remember, no, I'm not. He never leaves me, never forsakes me, makes me stronger, works for my good, guarantees my protection through it, because if I couldn't get through it, he'd just take me home to be with him. So what's his plan for this whole trial thing? To give me another arrow in my quiver, so that when someone else is walking through it, I can say, you don't have to walk through this alone. And we lost the first baby that we were told would be the only baby we would ever have. We were told my wife and I would never have children. I was at a conference in 1985 in Washington, D.C. that was thrown by Campus Crusade for Christ and Youth for Christ. 26,000 kids in D.C. I was one of the workshop leaders. Right? McDowell was a mainline speaker. Chuck Colson was alive then. They were the hitters, but they used a bunch of us scrawny little fish to run some of the campus kind of stuff. And I happened to be one of the ones that was involved. We took a big group of people. We found out the week before we went, my wife was pregnant. That was after we'd been told we'd never have kids. We told them there. We were going to make that a surprise. And they figured Abraham and Sarah, after 10 years of being married, finally have a kid. We had been told, you're selfish. Don't you love it when church people would come up to us and say, I can't believe how selfish you are that you're not having kids. You guys would be great parents, but you're just so selfish. I thought, yeah, that's what it's all about. Well, what's going on? If I trusted you, I would talk to you. Clearly none of your business. And if you have such wisdom that you walk up to me or my wife and say how selfish you are, clearly you're talking about something you don't know anything about anyway. I'll pass. But at any rate, she's pregnant. We go there. One of our co-leaders I took was a doctor. And I don't remember what night it was. I remember Chuck Colson was speaking, and I had to take my wife into the big medical center, and she miscarried. And I remember the doctor coming over, and we had, I don't remember how many kids. It was a big group. I mean, they're just crying. They'd already been having name the baby contests on the airplanes and stuff going on. They'd all called their parents, so everyone was all excited. When we came back and landed that jet and came back down, it was total quiet. People just looking at my wife, looking at me, just like, what in the world? Some of God's choice servants, walk up. I'm not making any of this up. I remember when one of the gals walked up and said to my wife, well, this is how God disposes of babies that he knew wouldn't make it in the first place, so you need to consider it all joy and rejoice. It was not what my wife really needed to hear. Another one walked up and said, well, you kids are young. Don't worry, you'll have plenty more where this one came from. Not exactly, again, sage wisdom, right? Sound like one of Job's helpers. I like Job 26:3. Read it sometime. Where am I going with that? I'm saying sometimes people can say stupid things. Sometimes people can do dumb things. When we lost that baby, we thought we'd lost the only baby we'd ever have. 6 months later, Gail was pregnant again. Our son is now 30, loves Jesus, wonderful kid. I didn't know what was going to be going on with any of that. Neither did my wife. We didn't know how that thing was going to end. And people that thought they were helping by saying things that were very cliches, but not truthfully very helpful, were just one more thing that you had to say. I remember how many times telling my wife, they mean well. Now here's where I'm going with that. I had never in my life been in a girl's bathroom unless it was my mom taking me in when I was too little to know when I was a kid. I don't know. But my wife ended up with a ministry in our church in the girls' bathroom because it was so public we'd lost a baby. That, I mean, people came out of the woodwork grabbing her after service. I was always the one she would have to wait on. Once that happened, me and Fred the janitor were the last two people going out the door because they would be with Gail in the bathroom. I could hear them crying, I could hear them talking, and my wife would come out and say, she's had 7 miscarriages. Or, we have no idea because people wouldn't talk about it. We're in the middle of one of these where me and Fred are waiting for them to finish so we can lock the church up, right? And my wife says, come on in. And I said, I'm not going into a girl's bathroom. Are you kidding? I'm not doing that. She says, no, come on in. I walk in. Now, ladies, maybe you know this. Maybe it was just our church. But when you walk in, there was 2 rooms. The first room you walked in, there was this big red velvet couch, and there were green velvety chairs, and there were mirrors and everything. And then when they would go through is where what I'm expecting for a bathroom. I walked in there, and one lady was just bawling. My wife had her arm around her, and I said, no wonder you guys come in pairs all the time, man. I go, guys' bathrooms don't look like this. Ours, you just go in, do your business, and get out. You guys get to come in, sit on these chairs, do your hair, and all the rest. Trust me, there are no girls' bathrooms are like that. I'm a grown man. I didn't know that. But I looked at that, my wife and I talked and said, how many she talked with, I don't even know the number. But people who, because we were public, I was one of the pastors there, they would come in and pull my wife aside and say, okay, you get it. And she would talk with them, she would share with them, and she ended up giving away the comfort that God gave us. Did God allow us to go through something that felt hurtful? Yes, he did. Did he have a purpose for it? Yes, he did. Was he able to make good on it, make it work for our good? Oh, yes, he did. Did he give us the privilege of seeing protection as he walked us through it? Yes. And did we ultimately see how, according to his plan? Remember Galatians 2:20, you gave up the rights to you at Calvary. Remember Romans 12:1 and 2, you're a living sacrifice. I'm not supposed to have rights to me anymore. They're to God's. We made an exchange. When salvation was given to me as a free gift, he gets my life. The life I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me, gave himself up for me. It means he can do whatever the heck he wants. What am I suggesting? As you walk through situations, God has given you one more area he can use you. Yes, I can use you. Yes, I can use you. Yes, I can. Nope, you're not ready yet. I didn't approve that one. Yes, I can use you. Yes, I can use you. Yep, okay, then the door's open. But as I get through on the other side of it, it gives me one more quiver in my arrow that I can become an encouragement and help to someone else. Are trials capricious? No. Are they payback? No. Do the health, wealth, and prosperity people that say it's about secret sin, do they know what they're talking about? Typically, no. Does it mean they're insincere? The purpose of this talk is not to just beat on health, wealth, and prosperity. Just saying, read your Bible. Read your Bible. I can trust the Bible. I don't trust my own feelings. Why? I'm old enough to have realized, first, it's not biblical, and second, it doesn't work. So when you look at trials, keep it framed with the 4 P's, 4 verses, and just walk a person through it. Yes, there's purpose. Yes, there's promise. Yes, there's protection. And yes, there's a plan that once you grab a hold of it, maybe God's going to give you a ministry in that area as you give away what you were given. You take credit for it? No. He gave you the comfort, so now you get to give the comfort away. I hope that makes sense. God bless you.